Did somebody find him, take him back to the farm? That could have happened. But I think perhaps more likely, Asolo looked at the options before him, the opportunities before him, and he chose to go back to the farm because he thought that was his best option. You can hear these stories and you can feel guilt. I certainly have felt that, but I feel like guilt isn't all that useful. I think we should only feel guilty if we're not fully exploiting our opportunities and our privileges to make a difference. We live in a world where 1.3 billion people live on less than $1.25 per day. We live in a world, I met a kid in Zambia who he can't go to school because his parents can't afford $6 to send him to school. $6 for the year. What you are doing is not normal. It is not normal to get the level of education that you are getting. When you graduate, you're going to be in the top 7% of educated people in the entire world. If you're earning or go on to earn $16,000 a year or more, which I hope you do, you'll be in the top 10% of global earners. If you earn $50,000 a year or more, you'll be the top 1% of global earners. This education, these opportunities come with responsibility. And so as I processed all of this and thought about what can I do? There's so much inequality and injustice in the world. What can I do? I wish there was just some equation. And you're probably feeling a little bit of that right now. Well, what can I do? Tell me what I'll do. I'll do it. So I decided I would go and try to find out, kind of search for the good person equation, which became my book, Where Am I Giving? So I traveled around the world to meet amazing givers. And the first thing I learned was that gratitude first. You have to realize the gifts that you have been given before you can start to help other people, to be motivated to help other people. Who all is responsible for you getting here today? No one probably got here on their own. So I met a young man named Ashok in India. And Ashok was in school. He didn't like it. He was one of 65 students in class. He couldn't read. He wasn't learning anything. So he heard his parents every day go to the fishing docks to work. And they go fishing. And so he knew that he could make some money at the fishing dock. So he would skip school with his buddies, and they would walk around, and the fish that were being carried that fell off, they would gather up the fish, and then they would go into to a different market, and they would sell it. And they would make enough money to buy a candy bar, soft drink, go see a movie. Life was good for Ashok and his buddies. Then his dad found out what he was doing. And his dad's like, no, you have to stay in school. And now his buddies, what they were doing is they were paying off their parents. Hey, I'm skipping school, but hey, here's a little money, And that worked for them. So they didn't go back to school. Ashok stayed in school, graduated, got a job at a nonprofit outside of his community, which he would call a slum community, slum in Mumbai. And he would come back in at night and he saw these kids that reminded him of his friends. Now his friends, once they weren't going to school, they got involved in gangs and drugs and drinking and smoking and just were on a completely separate path from Ashok. So when he was coming back in, he was seeing other kids in his community that were on the same path. So Ashok wanted to do something. So he's like, hey, I would like to coach you how to play football, soccer. And show up at this place. He told these 18 kids, and on Saturday, and I'll start to coach you. And these kids were excited because they didn't have any formal coaching of any type ever. It's not something that was even possible for them. So Saturday comes, and Ashok gets a phone call. Ashok didn't show up because he didn't think anyone was going to show up. So they call him where are you? So Ashok comes rolling up, the soccer coach, and I talked to some of the kids, the original 18, and he's walking towards them. He's got no soccer ball. What kind of soccer coach is this? And so he led them through some drills. He's like, next week I'll bring a soccer ball. So he spent like a quarter of his wage on a $6 soccer ball and started a program called the Oscar Foundation, which now has reached 12,000 kids all across India. And I think the lesson we get from this is start small. A $6 soccer ball. And start where you live. Yeah, when we give money to a place like Uganda, sometimes it can be magnified by 100, the impact it can make. But start in the community where you live. And it doesn't have to be something huge. This woman is from Kenya. Her name's Umrah. She was nominated for a CNN Hero Award. And what I want to say about her is that she works for this company. She started this company called Safari Doctors. They deliver medical supplies and services to people in this remote area of Kenya where there's like this extremist group called Al-Shabaab that's kind of terrorizing everything. So she takes some doctors in and eye doctors and even veterinarians to see the animals in these remote regions. But she grew up in Kenya, in this community, and she got an opportunity to travel to, she was actually at Oberlin College in Ohio. She was in school in England for a while too, and she talked about how traveling, like her mind was just stretched, and she had all these new experiences. And neuroscientists have actually seen this, that new pathways are made, like your brain physiology changes when you travel, when you're interacting with a new culture. But what I want you to take away from this is that she went back. So often the people I met, even Ashok, went out of the community to get an education, to have a job, and then came back to his community to make a difference, to kind of see with new eyes. It's so important to travel. And when we live in a world where we can easily travel again, I hope you'll seek out opportunities. I know there are study abroad opportunities. We were talking about them just a little bit ago here on campus. So look at those opportunities. This young woman's name is Rosie. She lives in one of the most violent slum communities probably in the world. People are just, I won't even go into details, but they meet their end in just horrible ways, by gangs, by police officers. If you have a loved one that gets shot and killed, you have to pay like $50 per bullet that they pull out of the body of your loved one. To the police, you have to pay if you want the body back to bury it somewhere else. So this is the community she lives in, and she was one of 6 kids, and her mom died of AIDS. No, she did not die of it. She had AIDS, I believe, but she's still alive. It's been a while. I'm trying to remember all the stories. And she got involved in gangs because there was really nothing else to do in that community. So she was involved in selling guns, selling drugs, and eventually she met someone who kind of pulled her away from that lifestyle. And then she started to help other people. Now she works to promote peace in her community. In this place on the edge of a dump where it is the most insecure place I've ever walked. Like you could just feel it. Like we had a taxi driver wouldn't even take us into this place. And so she told me this, which I thought was an amazing quote. And she shared some more. I just want you to hear her voice and hear her passion for her community. Oh, there's no audio on that one. But she used her story. She used her experiences. I was in the gang too. And I got out. And together we can make our community better. And I really think that's one of the biggest things that we have to make a difference with. The hardest thing that you've been through in your life is often the greatest source of strength to help other people who are where you were before. And you can give them hope because you made it through. And that's what Rosie has done. And in this time, the last year has been hard on us all, and it's been isolating. And really the greatest way to help yourself is often to help someone else. Rosie's not sitting around feeling sorry for herself. She always has something to do, especially during this pandemic when she was helping feed people in her community. The same with Ashok. They weren't playing soccer anymore. They were feeding people in the community who could no longer have jobs. So I kind of wanted to find out, what is this good person equation? So like, who could I talk to that might have some ideas? So I thought, maybe Gandhi's great-grandson would have something to say about this. So I went to Tushar Gandhi, and I met him in India. And I'm like, Tushar, like I want this good person equation. I want, like, you do X, you give this much money, you volunteer this much of your time, you do these type of things, and like, you're good. That's it. You did your part. And Tushar told me, you just have to increase in your giving. Like, there's no good person equation. But still, I thought I'd come up with one. So research shows that if you volunteer at least 100 hours per year, you'll actually live longer and a happier life. So that's one recommendation. I think we should give 2% of our income, if possible, that we can give at different stages of our life, to global causes where our impact can be magnified by 100, but also support local causes too, especially local causes that are like immediate needs of like feeding people and getting kids educated. And then 1% of like, hey, arts, a friend, whatever. That's kind of a rough, because I had to come up with something. So I thought, that's what I'm going to, and then engage in 6 acts of some type of citizenship or political engagement of some type. So that, Tushar does not think this is a good idea. And I think he's right. A good person equation kind of is like trying to make yourself feel comfortable with the world that we live in. And what all of these experiences told me is that we should never feel comfortable with this world that we live in. We should be getting we should be how's it go? We should be always uncomfortable, and we should just be comfortable with knowing that we're always going to be uncomfortable. Because it doesn't make sense that there's more slaves now than ever. Lower percentage, because there's a greater number of people. It doesn't make sense that a kid in Zambia can't go to school for $6, that Rosie has to live in a community as violent as she lives in. There really is no great good person equation, because that kind of assumes that what is the minimum that we can do to make a positive difference in the world, as opposed to what is the maximum that we can do with the gifts that we have been given. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, happy to answer questions. There's a mic. Also, if you want to follow along my adventures, I think that this phone number goes to some Google Voice thing, and I'll put you on an email list that you probably never will get. But I will promise to email you I have these things called the giving rules in the book. There's probably too many of them. You saw a couple of them tonight, and I'll send you the whole list of those. So if you want to kind of follow along my adventures, I'll send you an email with my links to Instagram and stuff like that. So, any questions? Yeah, so human trafficking, totally solo situation falls into human trafficking. There's a whole spectrum of that. I personally have not done a lot of research or investigating of sex trafficking. Now, the Facing Project, the nonprofit that I co-founded, we actually did a project in Atlanta on sex trafficking. So, but like they ran it there, and we were kind of just aware of this amazing work that they were doing. We helped them do it. And it's much more prevalent than most people realize. And Atlanta is like a major hub because of the airport there. So that project aired on like public TV, and a woman who had been trafficked, who now was like living a life like husband, kids, like, kind of your average life job. And she had been trafficked and never told anyone. She drove to the station to talk to the other people who had that had similar experience to reach out for help. They took those stories and they turned them into a kiosk at the Atlanta airport where you could hear the stories and then be educated how to identify sex trafficking or human trafficking at the airport, and you can like listen to the stories. And so that's the only kind of tangential, but I haven't looked at that a lot. That would be that. I mean, when I've told some difficult stories and been in some not awesome situations, and when they said we're going to do sex trafficking, I'm like, whew, that seems pretty heavy. But they did a wonderful job with that project.
An efficient organization to give to, use that in your last couple of slides. Something like charitynavigator.org, is that something you'd recommend, or do you have something?
Yeah, I've got so the question is like, how do you find like efficient especially international nonprofits to give to? So there's a couple sources I have for you. There's a philosopher named Peter Singer. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, and he has a website called The Life You Can Save that has recommended charities to give to. And there's also an organization called givewell.org. And there's a kind of a whole movement called effective altruism that givewell.org is part of. And they, like, what is the most efficient way to save a life? Like it's math, you know what I mean? They look at, and so for the last like 5 years, it's been bed nets in Malawi, and for like $3,500 equals one life saved. So they get really, then it can almost get maddening a little bit. I was like riding my lawnmower I just bought, like a zero-turn lawnmower, and listening to like $3,500. I'm like, how much for this mower? Like I just saved a life. I'm driving this mower. So like you can kind of spiral a little bit in that world, but that's definitely for international organizations a really good one to look at. But I also think we should just give more intentionally. The average American thinks about where to give less than 2 hours a year. We don't give very much internet. We have 2% of our income, which puts us as the most generous country on the planet in terms of the amount of money that we give. Only like 5% of that 2% goes to international causes where that money can go the furthest. Now, granted, the effective altruist would always say, hey, there's going to be other people that give locally. You don't need to give locally. But I think also they're missing some of that. Like you need to be a member of a community, and you need to support those people in your community as well, like with your time and your talent, but then also with your dollars if that's something you can do.
So you said that you thought you could go anywhere you wanted and have an adventure. Why did you choose somewhere so far away to begin?
Yeah, so I was just randomly going to go wherever. Really my first trip out of college was, and I was very, I benefited from many privileges and many opportunities, and one of them, when I graduated college, Grandma gives all the grandkids $5,000. Come on, that's awesome. And so I saved up out of Grandma's money, and I went to Hawaii, where I lived with my homeless cousin who hitchhiked to Hawaii from Ohio. Not sure how that worked. And we basically just camped and hiked, lived real cheap, ate Spam, till I was like, I'm never eating Spam again. And then I went to Australia, and I went to Thailand and Nepal and zipped through Europe because Europe was way too expensive. I like to be able to eat food. And then, so that was kind of my first trip there. And it really, that was inspired by a geology class I had at college where the professor was sharing different rock formations he had seen. And I really wanted to go and travel, and I loved the Travel Channel when they used to actually show travel shows as opposed to Bigfoot hunting shows now or ghost shows. And so I went to him hey, I just want to, I know everyone's getting jobs, and I should be trying to get a job or something, but I just want to go and just live really cheap and just travel places. And so he kind of helped lay out my first itinerary. But as for like Honduras, my first trip with the shirt, it was just a random. I was going to go, I mean, I couldn't have gone wherever. I think at that point in time, if it had been in like Lesotho, which is like a country near South Africa, I think it might actually be completely surrounded by South Africa. I'm not sure. Like, that would have been too expensive for me to get to. So Honduras was not actually that far away.
One more question here. We hear a lot of controversy like Nike and Adidas and all these, these big shoe manufacturers. Is it true? I mean, are they, involved in like slave labor with the manufacturing of their shoes that we buy for $150 here and $200 and all their clothing?
So the question is like, are Nike and Adidas relying on slave labor? Well, I mean, there's been a pretty strong anti-sweatshop activist movement since like the early to mid 90s, and they really came out swinging at Nike. And so Nike is now actually one of the better ones, grading on a curve, I'd say. So they have higher standards. They list where their factories are. Now there's this really cool website I just found. It's called Import Yeti. So you can take any company, and their import records are collected by this website, and you can just search for it. So there has been more awareness. When I first started looking at this stuff, the companies didn't have anyone in corporate social responsibility. I would call to try to make contacts, and it was just the guy who buys from the factory. It wasn't anyone thinking, like, how are we treating people? And in Bangladesh, 2013, I think it was, a factory collapsed, and they killed 1,134 people and injured thousands more. And that seems to have been, and I think most people don't even know about this anymore. One of the biggest industrial disasters ever, and most of us don't even know about it. But the companies themselves, some of them have made really positive steps. The factories in Bangladesh are safer now. There's fair trade clothing now. Like fair trade, it's like a minimum price that people will get paid, certain working conditions established, and a premium goes back for the workers to decide, to vote on how they want to spend that money. So there have been some it's much easier now to be a more informed, ethical consumer than it was in the past. But it also is such an American way to think, like, we're going to consume our way to a better world, We have to have a little bit more complex conversations than that.
Okay, I have a question about your book, and it's been a little while since I read it, the Where Am I Giving? I remember somewhere in the book you said something about why don't we change our culture, and instead of showing off how we buy, why don't we show off how we give? And so I read that and I was like, yeah, I'm going to do that. So I gave sort of in a situation that was sort of public. Like I wrote this check and like gave it to this organization and was like, here. And after I did it, I felt so weird. Like it didn't feel good. Like I thought, okay, I'm going to make this effort to make giving public. And it didn't feel good. It felt weird, like I was bragging about something. And so I'm curious, do you ever get feedback from people on this like idea of changing our culture to show off our giving? And do people feel comfortable with it? Because I didn't.
No, I mean, people really struggle with it. It's an awkward thing to do. But I mean, people, if you look through Facebook right now, you'll find someone who just bought a new car and took a picture of it, like, look at my new car. I'm so blessed. Thank you. Like #blessed. But if you gave money to a really good cause and you post it, people are like crucifying you for it. And it doesn't make sense to, I feel the same way. I'm not always publicly stating that. I mean, the more people that would do that, it would become more acceptable, maybe. But it doesn't surprise me that you had that feeling. And who knows what other people thought too. But screw them. You know what I mean? Like, stop posting your new outfit or your new whatever that you consumed that's just for you. Like, I'm supporting this really good cause. Now, there is more of a movement among like billionaires of doing this. Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, and people are giving, and there's like a pledge where people are giving a certain percent of their income. And you can take a giving pledge at thelifeyoucansave.com or .org, and you pledge a certain amount of your income. And so there is a community where it is acceptable, but just in general, people, like I've posted that before on social media, and people just go crazy. Like, well, the Bible says that you shouldn't talk about where you give money. I don't think the Bible says that. I mean, it says it, but not how I said it. But yeah, I think it's so messed up that we can't talk about, hey, here's a cause I believe in. Here's the good work that they do. I just wrote a check for $200 to them. You should too. What's wrong with that?
Hi. I grew up near Oxford, Ohio, and Miami always had a reputation for a good education, but also an education to a fairly elite crowd, at least for the Midwest. And I wondered the ways in which your college education prepared you for these experiences, but also the ways it may have failed to prepare you for these kinds of experiences.
Yeah, how did Miami... So what do you say, Miami has a reputation of what?
Oh, offering a good education, but also to a fairly prestigious crowd, at least for the Midwest.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, I was the oddball at Miami. Everyone's like, what frat are you in? I'm like, it's not like... You can find your people anywhere, right? Yeah, I mean... I never got a job with my degree, and I probably never will, nor necessarily want to. But without that sociology class, without that geology class, without those anthropology classes, even like a concept like participant observation of how anthropologists go in and they just don't ask people questions. They participate in the ceremony or the feast, and they kind of feel what that's like, and they don't judge people. So none of that would have been possible. The curiosity to want to go to these places. I grew up in farm country, where we had to drive your tractor to school day. I was in the top 10 in my class, but there's only 47 kids. I got best dressed because I had the nicest T-shirts, so to go and to see, have my mind open to, there's other ways to process and see the world, and we can learn from them, and I can maybe adapt some of that to how I'm going to live my life, and all this has completely changed the way that we live our lives, the way that we're raising our kids. And then how college failed me, I would say that, I think there was enough opportunities there I could have made, the most of it. I wish I would have learned a language. I speak a little bit of Spanish, and it's really bad. And I wish I would have studied abroad. Those are my two biggest regrets from college. So if you're ever thinking about studying abroad, again, I don't know about this environment, but the sooner the better. I think sometimes students wait too long in their college career, and then they're on their major classes, and then it's hard to fit it in, or it seems impractical. So I think the sooner the better. And there's also a lot of assistance you can get often. I think I was reading on the website, there's a scholarship maybe you can apply for some educational opportunities up to $750, something maybe. Maybe I just made it up. There should be now, right? Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so those are the things I wish I would have done in college. So I don't know if it really failed me, but I maybe failed my college experience a little bit.
Well, Kelsey, we're absolutely honored and delighted that you came, and this is your first speaking engagement.
A long time. Yeah, 15 months probably. Thank you. I'll stick around if you have questions. Feel free to come up or sign your book if you have a book.